This is the video for part 2 of the two-part video lesson for chapter 3 in your Gateways textbook. So you should have your blue Gateways textbook out. You should be on page 52, and we're going to start with where it says Miracle at Philadelphia, the Constitutional Convention. You need to have a pen, pencil, or highlighter ready, and also your guided notes to follow along with so you can fill them in as we go through this reading. 55 delegates gathered at the State House in Philadelphia in May 1787. It was the same building where 8 of them had signed the Declaration of Independence 11 years earlier. Back in 1776, the colonists had cut their ties to Britain in the name of liberty. The challenge now was to construct a central authority strong enough to defend the nation and promote its well-being, yet not so strong that it would threaten individual liberties. Every state, except Rhode Island, sent representatives to Philadelphia to revise the Articles. All of the delegates were men who owned property. More than half of them had trained as lawyers. 1/3 of these men had fought in the Revolution. The delegates immediately elected George Washington to preside over the proceedings. Just as quickly, they voted to keep their discussions secret from the public in order to encourage a freer exchange of ideas. So they figured if they kept their meeting secret, so what they said in that meeting stayed in that meeting, they'd be able to discuss their ideas freely without worrying about what people on the outside were going to find out. Next, the delegates took a surprising step. They decided to replace the Articles of Confederation rather than just revise them. The delegates set about writing a new constitution, which is a plan of basic rules for government. Underline or highlight, Constitution, a plan of basic rules for government. Remember, the Constitution is the rule book. It describes and says how that government's going to work. Their assembly became known as the Constitutional Convention. So, they met delegates from each of the states, the 13 states, all of them except for Rhode Island, all sent representatives. And they met, and they discussed what they were going to do to fix the Articles of Confederation, because they just weren't working. But there were so many problems with the Articles of Confederation, they decided to just throw the Articles of Confederation out and make a constitution instead, which ended up being the government we have today. So this became known as the Constitutional Convention, because they all met and ended up making a constitution.
Pause the video. Take a look at your guided notes. You now need to answer questions 1 and 2 based on the information we just covered in the reading. So you will find the answers to question 1, who did all the delegates elect to preside over the Constitutional Convention? So who do they select to be the person in charge or presiding over the Constitutional Convention? And question 2, where do the delegates meet to hold the Constitutional Convention? So where do they have this meeting at? Where did this meeting take place? Make sure you answer both of them in a complete sentence to receive credit. Any partial sentences or one-word answers will not be accepted, and you will not receive credit for that answer.
What the delegates agreed on. The delegates who met in Philadelphia in 1787 generally agreed the government created by the Articles of Confederation was too weak. But how would they remedy this? Skip over this active citizen box and turn to page 54. Only a few days after Governor Randolph's speech, the delegates passed the following resolution: that a nation government ought to be established consisting of a supreme legislative, executive, and judiciary. The members of the Constitutional Convention further agreed that this new legislature should have 2 houses similar to the British Parliament. The first house is to be known as the House of Representatives, would represent the people. Its members would be elected directly by the people. The second house, to be known as the Senate, would represent the wisdom, wealth, and property of America. As one delegate put it, the Senate should have the most distinguished characters by rank and property. Senators would serve for longer terms than members of the House of Representatives. This way, they would not be subject to the same popular pressures. The delegates equally recognized the need for a national executive to provide leadership and to carry out the laws. But should this national executive be a single person or a small group? So, remember, the Articles of Confederation, they had a Congress. That's all they had was a legislative branch. So that legislative branch is making laws, but nobody's following them. It doesn't work. So with this new government, where they made the three branches, they decided the legislative branch would have the House of Representatives and the Senate. But then they said we need an executive. We need someone to enforce these laws. So if the lawmakers make the laws in the legislative branch, we need someone that's going to make the people follow them and enforce those laws, and that'll be the executive branch. So they had to decide, do they want one person? Because remember, they were afraid of having a king like they used to have, or would it be a small group? After some debate, the members of the Constitutional Convention decided that the national executive should be one individual, known as the President. They further decided to put that the President should be given the power to veto, which means to deny or refuse. Underline or highlight veto, deny or refuse new laws passed by Congress. However, to make sure the President was not too powerful, the delegates decided that 2/3 of both houses of Congress should be able to override the President's veto.
Pause the video again. Look back at your guided notes. Based on the reading we just went over, you should now be able to answer questions 3, 4, and 5. Question 3 says, what were the names of the two groups that would make of Congress? So the two parts of Congress, what are the names of those two parts? Question 4, the House of Representatives would represent which group? So which group of people is the House of Representatives, who are they representing? Who are they standing for? You can find that directly in the reading. And question 5, the Senate would represent which group? So we just said the group that the House of Representatives is going to be speaking for. So who is the Senate going to represent? After you've answered those 3 questions in complete sentences, continue on with the video.
Large against small. Of course, the delegates did not agree on everything. Their most important disagreement was over representation in the new houses of Congress. Here, the larger states opposed the smaller ones. The larger states felt it was unfair for smaller states to have an equal voice in Congress when they had fewer people. The smaller states feared that the larger states would abuse their power if they were given more representatives because of their larger populations. So the big states, the large states, said, we have more people, we should have more votes. The smaller states were saying, just because you have more people doesn't mean you should have more power than us with more votes, so it should be in equal votes. So they were kind of arguing back and forth. Virginia, then the most populous state in the nation, proposed that the representation of each state in Congress should be in the proportion to its population. That is, the number of each of the state's representatives should be based on the size of its population. Underline or highlight that sentence. The number of each state's representatives should be based on the size of its population. That's the idea they had. The delegates from Virginia wished to apply this principle to both houses of Congress. Since Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania had the largest populations, they would therefore hold the most seats in both House of Representatives and the Senate. New Jersey, one of the smallest states, suggested the opposite. Its delegates argued that the representation in the legislature should remain as it had been under the Articles of Confederation. Each state should have an equal number of representatives in both houses. So New Jersey wanted it where every state sent the same amount. Virginia, being a bigger state, wanted it to be based on their population. You get more representatives if you have more people. At the heart of this disagreement were conflicting views on the role of the states in the future national government. The Great Compromise. Have you ever had a disagreement and settled it with a compromise? A compromise occurs when each side of a dispute gives up something in order to reach a solution that both sides can accept. Delegates from the Connecticut proposed just such a compromise in 1787. States should enjoy proportional representation in the House of Representatives, which that means proportional representation, remember, it's one of our vocab words. That means based on population. States with larger populations would have more representatives there. This would benefit the large states. And each state should have an equal number of senators in the U.S. Senate, and this would benefit the smaller states. So, they took the Virginia plan and New Jersey's plan and kind of put them together. They said we have two parts of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. So one of them, the House of Representatives, will be based on population, like Virginia wants. And then the Senate, everyone will send two, just like New Jersey wants, and then everybody will be happy. After 2 months of debate, a revised version of the Connecticut plan was finally adopted. The delegates agreed that each state would have 2 senators in the Senate and the number of representatives proportional to its size in the House of Representatives. This solution became known as the Great Compromise. It explains the organization of the 2 houses of Congress that we still have today. So I want you to put a box or circle this entire paragraph and kind of put a star, something to make it stick out, because this is what the Great Compromise is, the way our legislative branch is set up.
Pause the video again. Take a look at the guided note question 6. The Great Compromise combined both the Virginia and New Jersey plan. Remember, Virginia represented the large states and New Jersey the smaller states, and they both had different ideas for what they wanted from the reading. By stating the House of Representatives would benefit the blank blank, and each state would have how many senators? Question 7. Why would small states and states with larger populations agree to this? So why would this really benefit small states and the states with the large populations, especially the smaller states with large populations? After you've completed that, make sure you have the definitions and the defined section completed on the left-hand side of the Cornell notes. Then, in your books, on page 57, I want you to complete the top half of the page, the ladder where you complete the concept ladder for the Articles of Confederation. You do this by completing the concept ladder on the right by adding your own descriptions and explanations. So what you need to do is you need to go through and explain the words you see on the right side of the ladder, and it builds up the ladder. So start at the bottom and explain what each one of those means. After you've done that, you completed today's lesson.